We're now live. You can go ahead.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for joining us today. We're going to get started in just a minute. Before we do, I'd like to make an announcement, or have Julie make an announcement for our Spanish-speaking viewers. Julie.
Thank you. Muy buenas tardes y bienvenidos a la sesión informativa. Esta reunión se trata de los sitios de alojamiento de emergencia en el Centro de Administración del Condado de Sonoma. Si está participando por Zoom y quiere escuchar la presentación en español, por favor busque y oprima el globo que indica interpretación al pie de la página de Zoom y seleccione el idioma español. Para los que estén participando por Facebook, pueden escuchar la interpretación en español en el canal de YouTube del condado. Para escuchar la versión en español, puede utilizar el enlace de YouTube que se encuentra en la página de Facebook del condado de Sonoma. Muchas gracias. Back to you, Supervisor Corsi.
Gracias, Julie. I'm Chris Corsi. I'm chair of the Board of Supervisors for the County of Sonoma. And I'd like to welcome you to the first of two webinars we're hosting to discuss plans to create emergency shelter sites for people who are unsheltered right now. These sites are on two county-owned pieces of property, one on the county campus here at Administration Drive in northern Santa Rosa, and the second in a parking lot at the Santa Rosa Veterans Memorial Building near the fairgrounds. If you registered for this webinar today, you will not need to register for a second webinar we'll be holding on Monday. You can use the same Zoom link for both meetings. And for the viewers watching on Facebook or YouTube, you can still register for both webinars by clicking the link that's pinned in the comments. For folks, if you know folks who haven't been able to make it to this webinar or to Monday's webinar, a recording of the webinars will be available on the county's Facebook page, as well as the county's YouTube channel. So we're here because over the last 4 years, the county has repeatedly had to close sections of the Joe Rodota Trail due to public safety concerns caused by homeless encampments. Most recent closure was on January 20th, about a month ago, when 34 campers were relocated. They were provided services and interim housing. The problem is that these encampments continue to become, they reassemble more frequently. As of today, as many as 75 individuals are camping along the trail in Southwest Santa Rosa. And due to this situation, the Board of Supervisors on Tuesday declared a shelter crisis. And we authorized the creation of up to 2 emergency housing shelters in which people will be able to camp. Today, we're going to focus on one of those shelter locations. That's the county campus location, as I said, on Administration Drive here in northern Santa Rosa. I'll introduce our other panelists in just a minute, but before I do, I want to say that the two most frequent questions that I've been receiving are why now and why here at these sites. The how, or the why now, is because this is an urgent situation. As I said, we have declared a shelter crisis. The camps on the Joe Rodota Trail, which is a county regional park, have doubled in size twice in the past month. We need to have shelter available to clear people out of these camps. By law, we need to have a place for people to go, whether they accept that place or not, when we clear the camps. These actions that we're taking will give us the capacity to offer that shelter right now. As far as why here at these sites, these are two pieces of property that the county owns, that the county controls. They're close to services, they're close to transit for the folks who live here as they are working to transition into permanent housing. and they're available right now. So that's the why now and why here. So as we go through this meeting today, there'll be several speakers. I want to introduce, I'll be joined today by Supervisor James Gore, whose district includes the county campus and the neighborhoods around it. By Dave Kiff, our Director of Homelessness Services, a division of our Department of Health Services. He'll have a presentation to address the operations and security of these managed housing sites. We'll also hear from the Director of the Department of Health Services, Tina Rivera, who will go over the kind of services and treatment that will be offered to the residents of these shelters. I also understand that Santa Rosa City Council members Chris Rogers and Victoria Fleming are in the audience with us today. Rogers represents the area around the Veterans Building, and Victoria Fleming represents the area around the county campus on the Santa Rosa City Council. And we know that many of you will have strong opinions about these proposals and a lot of questions about how they'll work. We will answer as many of those questions as we can today. Again, this meeting is going to focus on the county campus site. We'll save any questions that we have about the Vets building, either to the end of this meeting, if we run out of questions about the county campus site, or we'll save those Vets building questions until Monday's meeting, which is about the Vets building. So at this point, I'd like to invite my colleague, Supervisor Gore, to join the club here. Hop on in, James.
Thank you very much, Supervisor Corsi, and for everybody for being here. For those of you who had a chance to join us on Tuesday, I want to thank you at our emergency board meeting. It was a difficult conversation, but it was a real conversation. It was a conversation that really is all about this place and time where we live. If you look around, not just Sonoma County, California wide, the number one and number two issues are inextricably linked: housing and homelessness, right? If you look at any issues for constituents, how we manage it, for those of us, not even as constituents, but your neighbors, as supervisors, live in these communities. For all of us, we know that this is the issue of our day, among many others with all of our disasters. So, we're in a unique situation for a variety of reasons. One is, as Supervisor Corsi has mentioned, is that the laws have changed, and they've changed the entire dynamic of how homelessness is managed. For 30 plus years, homelessness was managed in a way that didn't work. It didn't make progress. I call it a whack-a-mole approach. And that's not how you deal with people's lives on the streets or people in communities where they're impacted by encampments. So what that meant is, in many situations, is if there was an encampment that got too large in one area, you just went in and enforced it. It scattered. You offered some services, moved into a different area, grew in another area, and onward and onward and onward. Basically, those kind of lack of strategy in this case, led to an increasing homeless population that continued to be have a lot of difficulty with serving, but a lack of permanent supportive housing, interim housing, and shelter solutions. And so many of you know that the Joe Rodota Trail, as Supervisor Corsi mentioned, has been in the news for a long time. Pre-pandemic, we took significant action. And some people have said, what's different? Well, I'll start by saying what's different is that after the round one of the Joe Rodota Trail, we've created, along with our city partners, more than 500 locations for non-congregate shelters. And of those, 500 total spots, but 400 plus of those are non-congregate shelter or interim housing solutions. And then another 100 of those are permanent supportive housing. We have put money behind it. We have put effort behind it. And everywhere that we have provided a solution for homelessness, it comes with a cost. It comes with concerns. It comes with fear. It comes with a reality that we need to spend the money to be able to manage the situation on security, on all these other issues, on wraparound services, health and human services. And it's difficult. And I acknowledge that to you all, that your concerns are real And the way that these sites are going to be managed need to be in a way that address your concerns directly. I also say that not only as an elected official, but as somebody who has up just outside of Hillsburg, one of the largest encampments on the river in my backyard that impacts my life daily, and also a homeless solution, a project Home Key, an area where we purchased a hotel and converted it into interim housing just down the street from me, across from my kids' school. So just as you all, I deal with this directly. I deal with it personally. And I also deal with it as a community that's trying to lean in and do better. As Supervisor Corsi said, is that there are legal findings, and we have our legal team here on the call. You know, Matt Lilligren, I see, and others. And there's some cases. Some of you heard Martin v. Boise. There's another one here in Sonoma County. And what it really says is that you cannot move people who are camping on public places unless you provide an option for somewhere for them to sleep. So in some ways, folks might like us to figure out a way to show up either on the Joe Rodota Trail or over on a variety of the other encampments that we're continuing to deal with and make the issue disappear. The reality is that the solutions are in our community. And as Supervisor Corsi said, we are doing the best with what we have, and we understand the potential impact to your life. And so our goal is to manage these sites the way we have with the other sites that have led to those 500 plus beds. By doing the security, by doing the management, by doing the neighborhood outreach, by doing the neighborhood work that council members Rogers and Fleming also came to our board meeting and talked about, with not only us moving in action, but partnering with the city and doing this right if we are going to do it, to make sure that the impacts are mitigated, are dealt with in your community. Nothing's perfect. As we've learned from our fire survivors, the only true progress in this world is imperfect, relentless progress. The reason we're here is because of perfect inaction for many, many years. And we are taking imperfect, relentless steps each and every day. So as I've said before, you know, these locations have not totally been finalized, but we have approved through our emergency board meeting over on the campus center and also on the, the Veterans Building parking lot. This is for the County Campus Center. It's a location that we did analyze in the past before we created the Los Quilicos Village, which is out in Sonoma Valley, across from Oakmont. And we did look at this site, and I heard a lot of public comment on it at that time. And this is one of the options that's in front of us. There's also some of us who feel that you know, it's a site right next to the county offices, and it puts the responsibility on us to manage it appropriately. And in many ways, I agree. The other thing is that, as Chair Corsi mentioned, the webinar is going to be held today focused on this site. And those of you who live in the area, I saw many of you on our last board meeting stand up and voice your opinions, your concerns, your questions. And so the goal is to continue to do that and more, and then find ways to follow up more and more. And so once again, I want to thank the council members, Victoria Fleming and Chris Rogers, for coming and also showing us that you are represented through them, and that we need to all hold each other accountable and also hold each other up in partnership. Thank you, Chair. Back to you.
Thanks, Supervisor Gore. So I see that we've already got a number of questions in the Q&A, and invite people to continue to put questions there. We'll have staff members who will respond to some of those in writing. We'll respond to as many of those verbally on the air here as we have time for. If you're on social media, you can post your question in the comments area of Facebook or YouTube where you're watching, and members of our staff will share them with the panelists. Finally, if you can't get in it anywhere there or after this meeting, you can send questions to publicaffairs@sonomacounty.org. That's public affairs, one word, at sonoma-county.org. So before we go to the questions, Dave Kiff, our homelessness division director, is going to take a couple minutes to explain how these shelter sites will be managed and how they will work. Dave, take it away.
Thank you, Supervisor Corsi. I'm going to share my screen in just a moment. I do want to acknowledge that I'm here with my fellow team members, including our director, Tina Rivera, who's going to speak after I do, James Alexander, Dr. Nassim Bahadrani, and Michael Goss. The three that I just mentioned are people who coordinate overall county work across the county in terms of making sure that the homeless system of care, it continues to improve and work better. So we've got some good people here to help answer your questions. So I'm going to start to share my screen. You should see up on the screen the title slide. It just says Shelter Crisis and Emergency Shelter Sites. So what is the crisis? Supervisor Corsi mentioned this. There are risks to the public's health and safety involving the Joe Rodota Trail. And key to that is we have very limited places to offer housing if we need to clear the trail within the current legal parameters. So what's been experienced, we talked to the board about this, we're just kind of stuck in a cycle. We house people, they fall out of housing, they return to the trail. And that's in part because we don't have enough long-term solutions for folks who are coming out of chronic homelessness. And a significant majority of the folks on the trail are coming out of chronic homelessness. So what the solutions that the board talked about on Tuesday was to declare this shelter crisis, to work to start to clear and clean and bring the trail back to a recreational use. And then go ahead and set up to 2 new emergency shelter sites. And so the board funded these sites. They're proposed to be either individual tents or individual small shelters like at Los Gilicos. We have a plan to potentially accommodate some recreational vehicles, similar to how the city of Santa Rosa operates its site off of Stony Point. There'll be restrooms and shower service. None of the uses, at least in either site, will involve other properties around it. This is a parking lot centered activity. There'll be a fence around it. There'll be a security detail 24/7. And we use what's called the housing first approach, but with rules. In other words, folks do not have to be clean and sober as they enter. They do have to comply with rules when they arrive. And that allows people who have substance use disorder, behavioral health issues to get the roof over their head that they need to start to recover. It's also housing focus, meaning we'll be working every day, our service providers, as Tina will talk about, to make sure that people are focused on their next housing plan. This is not a place to stay for a long time and wait. Tina will describe more about the wraparound services, and as noted there on the slide, about 40 units on each slide. This discussion today is about the county campus. We are looking at 2 potential locations. If you heard the board meeting, we were focused on, I'll scroll over the first site is what we call the Permit Sonoma lot. It's adjacent to Administration Drive. We would potentially use 3 of the parking bays to do that. That's about 1.24 acres, again, with a fence around it and security. Another site that Supervisor Rabbit asked us to look at, and I think it's a very viable site potentially, is off of Russell Avenue. This is Highway 101 right here. This is the adult detention facility here to the lower part of the screen. So that's also a site that could be used. So we're looking at both of those. One of the things that came up I wanted to address, it's been asked, what's our knowledge about when we have a site that's been operational and managed like these are proposed to be? What are the safety considerations? What are the police calls? So I made that outreach to all of our partners that work on these, and as noted on the screen, there's a number of them. We have there are facilities in Rohnert Park, and when that encampment was started to be managed with security, police calls fell by 55%. The last landing home key site, that's similar to what Supervisor Gore mentioned, there's been no reported increase in calls at all since that's been established, and that was established in October. LG Village or Los Gilicos Village, just 2 police calls in the last year, and those involved internal activities inside the village with more behavioral health crises. Horizon Shine is a safe RV, a safe parking location in Sebastopol. And anecdotally, my information is anecdotally from the police chief that calls across the community in Sebastopol significantly went down related to homelessness. We also know that the county is familiar with operating three major non-congregate shelter sites that involve the COVID response. And these have been well secured and quiet places. There are no known calls to the sites and no records of calls to the site, and that's from the operator. And then lastly, as Supervisor Gore mentioned, L&M Village in Healdsburg, no change in police response or calls before or after the opening. So I'm going to conclude here with this last slide. What helps in the long run? Well, it's efforts like this. We need to create a greater inventory of emergency housing as well as permanent supportive housing. And we also, the board discussed adopting additional limits on camping and public property. And then as noted there, this is something I explained to the board, that we're not just sitting here, we're applying for more funds, more grants from the state. There's a huge grant that is due on Monday, and that involves asking for more funds for permanent supportive housing. That would start to create the flow that helps make sure that we don't keep repeating this cycle as folks have indicated. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to hand this over to my colleague, Tina Rivera.
Thank you, Dave. Housing is important. It is the key to homelessness, but services and supports are also the key to maintaining folks in their homes. So when we talk about services and supports, our services and supports are being designed to provide a comprehensive and personalized support and resource so that individuals as well as families are able to address those complex issues and challenges that often accompany homelessness. And these are issues and challenges that can interfere with obtaining long-term housing stability, which is our goal. So the purpose with services and supports, those wraparound supports that you hear us talking about, is to improve the health and the well-being and the sustained recovery and the self-sufficiency of our county's most vulnerable residents. So our goal is to wrap around individuals in every aspect of their life. It's to break the cycle of mental health, to create housing, to assist in breaking down those community barriers that hold individuals and families back from being successful in their lives. Folks who have been homeless have oftentimes been chronically homeless, and they require individualized care coordination with intensive, sometimes behavioral health needs. So some are often dealing with lifelong cycles of trauma, substance use, complex healthcare needs, patterns of housing instability, incarceration, and poverty. So our goal with these services and supports is that each person gets focused attention with respect to their unique needs. So everyone is unique. They're going to have individualized needs. And so there'll be a wide range of supports so that individuals are stabilized within our community and they become good citizens. So our goal is to develop and implement care plans with our partners for individuals living in these managed encampments. This will assist them in improving their quality of life. You say, well, how is this possible? Well, we do this with our teams, our interdepartmental, multidisciplinary teams who are resourced by our department as well as our community-based organizational departments. They will improve access to the services and supports that are available through our department as well as our partners within the community. And they will help individuals get sustained engagement with persons at this particular site. With this intensive engagement, we will anticipate better outcomes. There'll be accountability on both sides with case managers as well as individuals participating in these supports and services. These supports and services will be client-based. Our case management teams will help folks progress towards self-sufficiency through whether the need be behavioral health treatment, workforce development, general assistance such as food security, if there are physical health needs, needs with respect to primary care needs, disability management, pro-social behaviors, Medi-Cal enrollments, CalFresh enrollments, SSI enrollments, identification assistance, basic needs, assistance with law enforcement. Established medical homes may be necessary for individuals. Of course, all along the way, ensuring that folks are working on housing placements. That's going to be key. There will be daily assistance in ensuring that folks are working on their plan of resourcing housing placements. Individuals may also need medication support and, of course, coordinated entry referrals. So these are the services and supports that will be available and that case managers will be working with actively daily with individuals at these sites. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Chair Corsi.
Thanks, Tina and Dave. I think the takeaway here should be hopefully an understanding that we're not just picking up and moving what's happening out on the Joe Rodota Trail onto these sites. These are shelter sites that are managed, that are maintained, and that are focused on getting people services to help them out of homelessness and into permanent housing. Once that happens with the initial people who are there, these sites will be available for the next people who are ready to move on through. This is part of the solution. So we've got almost 40 questions to start answering here. Please remember, this is recorded and will be available later on for viewing. So let's get started, Paul, and get some of these questions answered.
Great. Thank you, Chair Corsi. Paul Gullickson, Communications Manager. We just want to thank everybody for posting your questions either in the Q&A box if you are joining us via the webinar, or if you are on Facebook or YouTube and are posting, you can post your questions or comments in the comments area. You also, as Chair Corsi has mentioned, you're also welcome to send in your questions via email to publicaffairs@sonoma-county.org. We do have quite a number of questions. I just want to make sure everybody knows we will be compiling all of these questions and comments, and we'll be keeping them for the record and sharing them with others. So, but we will get to as many questions as we can, and I will do my best to try to compile them. But first, Chair Corsi, we have a number of questions related to security within this emergency shelter site itself. Let me start with a question from Sally from one of our emailed questions. She asks, you say that fencing will be constructed. What kind and how tall? Let's start with that one.
Okay, and I think that Dave will probably be taking some of these questions about the technical aspects of it, but I just want to make sure that everybody understands these are places for people to live, not to be detained. So these are not going to be people locked in these things. The fences are for privacy and for just containing the site itself. Dave, do you want to give a little more detail there about how these work around Sonoma County and elsewhere?
Sure, and that's correct, Supervisor Corsi. These are the fencing, for instance, is screened. It's chain link, but it's intended to both protect the privacy of those inside and the aesthetics from the outside. It'd be fully surrounding the emergency sheltering location, and there would be security to come in and depart. And that's 24/7 security.
And there's generally one way in and one way out of the entire site. Is that right?
Generally, yes. We certainly have to comply with the fire code in case there's an emergency. Yeah.
Okay.
On that note, Dave, a couple of questions related. Will there be drug and alcohol testing? And will children be allowed in the compound as well?
So very fortunately, Sonoma County does not have a significant issue with family homelessness, thanks to our many good caregivers, like Catholic Charities and the new Caritas Center. So if we had if whenever we see an individual on the trail with dependent children, we're able to, James and Nassim and Michael's team are able to put those folks into housing fairly quickly. That doesn't mean that a young person couldn't visit a relative, because there's no limitations on that. But yeah, generally this would be a place for the characteristics of the homeless camp now, the JRT camp, which is generally about 2/3 single males and about 1/3 females, with a handful of couples. And sorry, Paul, you answer the rest. If you ask the rest of your question, I know I missed part of it.
If there was going to be a drug and alcohol testing. Yeah.
Thank you. We approach sites like this as do all of our partners with Housing First. You do not have to be sober. You don't have to be in recovery to be housed there. Now, we would not allow drug use on site if we were aware of it. But we treat that in a harm reduction manner, that it's not an automatic departure from the program to have one relapse. But we again, the concept behind Housing First is you have the most success if you're able to provide the wraparound services that Tina mentioned without chasing people out that have the very problem you're trying to treat.
And Dave, would you explain that a lot of the funding that we receive from the state and federal government is dependent on us using that philosophy?
That's correct. Nationwide, Housing First follows the funding, or the funding follows Housing First, from our federal funds to our state funds. In fact, the grant that I spoke of is very strict about saying that they'll only award funds to Housing First approaches, and that's because they believe in it, and it's proven with evidence-based practices to be the most effective.
Since we're on the subject, will animals be allowed, pets, inside these shelter sites as well?
Yes. Part of folks' progress towards more stability in their lives and their housing are their pets. When we've observed and visited other managed encampments, pets are allowed. The pets get along pretty well.
Okay. While we're on the issue of security, we do have several questions related to what happens to those who break the rules and are either turned away or expelled from this emergency housing shelter. What happens to them, and will they be let go into the neighborhood? That's the primary concern of some of our questioners.
So our approach, if someone were to be asked to leave, required to leave this location, would be we would take them to the location of their choice. Again, this is not, and like the first question we'd ask them was, where were you before? That doesn't mean we take people to the trail again, but people will have some affinity towards a certain region that they were in before, and we're happy to take them there. We don't, that doesn't mean someone couldn't burst out of the gate and say, I'm just coming out in the neighborhood, but our service provider approach is to take them where they want to go.
Okay, great.
And again, Paul, I think it's important for everybody to understand that these people are here voluntarily. None of them are sentenced to be here or compelled to be here by anything other than a hope and a plan to make their lives better. If they leave, then they're leaving on their own. They're leaving voluntarily, and we can't make them go somewhere else.
Okay. We have another one of our residents who says, who says, I have so many concerns for the well-being of the residents at this camp. How will residents stay warm on cold winter nights? That's certainly been timely. Tents have no insulation. Will the tents have electricity?
So that's a great question. And what we're trying to establish what the appropriate and human-centered way of making sure there is warmth there. That individual heating devices in tents is a possibility. There's also a fire risk. We'll work with Permit Sonoma as the permitting agency to make sure that we're complying with the building code. There will be an opportunity and a place, whether it's inside a person's tent or inside a larger common area, where people could get warm and stay warm. And also, before we know it, summer will be here and they'll need a place to stay cool.
They had similar questions along those lines about shade and cooling. Okay. And how are the residents going to eat? Will they be expected to purchase and prepare their own food? How will that work?
Our intention today is to, again, follow the model that Rohnert Park has followed, I think with some success, and that is there is a provision of one major meal. It could be cold, it could be hot. We're trying to land on what's appropriate there. And then an opportunity to have snacks and other things to get you through the rest of the day. There's some evidence to show that providing 3 squares a day is not typical for what someone might need, and we don't want to waste food.
Okay.
Let
We
me
actually-
let
yeah,
me
go
follow
ahead.
up on that, Paul. Dave, there won't be cooking facilities, individual cooking facilities available for folks here, right?
That is correct. We had not intended to have individual cooking facilities.
But food will be provided.
Right.
Since our focus today is on the site on the county campus, we have a number of questions concerning from county employees or concerning county employees. An anonymous questioner asks, how will county employees who work evenings and weekends on the county campus be kept safe?
Well, I'd point out again, I very much respect that question, first of all. I'd point out again that we will have 24/7 security at the sites. And the slide that I showed about law enforcement response around existing operating sites hopefully shows folks who might have concerns that these are actually quite stable neighbors. They don't change life. So if you were practicing safe practices to leave the building late at night before, you'll want to continue to do that. I don't see your risk as being any different. In fact, there's a security team right there in the parking lot. I'm not trying to be dismissive of this because I take it very sincerely, but the evidence shows that these are safe both inside and outside.
And I'll just chime in as a county employee whose office is right across the street from this site, and who often is the last car in the parking lot, that I feel safer when more people are around rather than less. And, again, there will be security on this site. So I hope that we all find out, as others who are neighbors of these camps have, that it's not a safety problem. And let's all keep an eye out for ourselves and for each other in that manner.
And if I might also add, it's not just the security that's going to be on site. It's also the providers and their staff who will also be working on this site. They will also be 24/7. So staff will also be on site who will be working with this particular population. So, I think that also gets kind of lost. And then I think also what also gets lost is that these are human beings. These are people. These are not criminals. These are folks who have, for one reason or another, many varied reasons, fallen into homelessness and who now have an opportunity to come to a place where they can encourage and be increased in their quality of life and work with compassionate staff and who can assist them and develop a care plan to get back on their feet.
Thank you, Tina. Kate, one of our webinar guests, asks a very simple question: how long is temporary?
So the Board of Supervisors this week approved funding for up to a year for up to 2 sites. Not saying that this is only going to last a year. What we don't know is what the funding is going to be for the future, and that's part of the difficulty of dealing with homelessness issues, is that the state and federal funding that we rely on is not a continuous flow of funds. It happens in cycles. There's no guarantee that there'll be more when one cycle runs out. So we can't make any promises either way here, but we have funding for up to a year.
If I can shift for a second, we have a few questions related to the possibility of other sites. If we could, I'm just wondering if we could run through a couple of those. One asks, Amy from online asks, why has the back of the fairgrounds not been considered as an option?
It has been considered as an option. The fairgrounds as an entity has been fairly strong about saying that their fair uses demand the full use of their location, and that it wouldn't be acceptable to us and to the residents who would reside in this tent, in this encampment, to suspend it for a month and relocate it and then brew it back after the fair.
There's also part of the fairgrounds, the ball fields, as it's what they used to be at the end of the south end of Brookwood Avenue, across the street from the fairgrounds, is still a site for about, is it 35 trailers?
35.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good question. Teresa, one of our email, one of those who sent an email question, asks, has the city considered building prefab tiny homes for unsheltered persons? What about buying mobile homes and camp trailers and setting them up on campgrounds for unsheltered persons to use? In some ways, we're doing that at Los Guilicos and the ball field, right?
It's exactly. At the Los Guilicos Village, again, been in operations for a while. It's 60 pallet shelters, those small shelters. And as noted by Supervisor Corsi, 35 trailers at the fairgrounds. It is an important model. It's an important solution. What I think, though, I'm sure the audience is realizing is the biggest question is what's next? What do we have? If we can house people in a trailer for a while, we can house people at Los Guilicos for a while, we need to create a system, and we are trying to create a system where that next step of housing is available. And that's why we're in this cycle that we've talked about. Sonoma County needs about 1,000 more beds. And these are not necessarily units. These are 1,000 more beds. You could have a home with 4 of them. That is this next step, and we call it permanent supportive housing. And that's where someone can live maybe for the rest of their lives with good care, with good wraparound services that make sure they stay in housing and never fall into homelessness again. We have a big shortage of that here. That's why Supervisor Gore mentioned the Project Home Key sites. Those are coming online. Another 60 beds comes online in Petaluma in April. The Caritas homes near downtown Santa Rosa come online with 30 more apartments in June. This is all exciting. It's chipping away at that 1,000, and it makes the system work better.
And then to follow up on the fact, I appreciate the caller's comment around the type of housing, the trailers or tiny homes, but we deal with a chronic homeless population who Many suffer from mental illness who are not ready for four walls, such as what you and I may live in, or who are ready to be locked or closed behind, for instance, a closed door. So oftentimes we have to understand that it is necessary for us to be creative and pivot and accommodate, if you will, individuals who aren't ready to necessarily come in. And so for us to be able to provide such a managed encampment such as this for individuals who aren't quite ready for that step, and this provides us with a space where our case managers can sweep in and wrap around these services and supports and work intensively with this population so that they can get prepared for that next level, whether it be that interim level, and work on them for that more permanent level to prepare them for the housing that perhaps you and I are used to. But right now, many individuals are not ready for that. And so you and I must realize that a suite of solutions has to be available to address this pressing need that we're seeing along the Joe Rodota Trail and in other encampments. Thank you.
Thank you all. That leads us to the next question. It's a very good segue, because we have a number of questions about that relate to the fact that the county has made clear that this is creating these emergency shelter sites will help the county get the upper hand of what's happening with Joe Rodota Trail. But some of them are also asking, some of our guests today are also asking whether this will help in removing people from other non-sanctioned homeless encampments around the county, not just Joe Rodota Trail. Any thoughts on that?
Well, the growing the number of interim housing solutions, as Tina mentioned, will help the overall county with the small c, the region, better be able to manage, be better able to manage encampments. And so that, again, that strategic plan that I think I mentioned, it says we need at least 200 more beds like the 80 that we're proposing here in the system in order to make the system flow better. And those are right-of-way beds. So yes, it should allow all of us as one coordinated county to address encampments and to provide a compassionate response to the people who are unhoused and get folks into housing safely and where they can get the care they need.
And I want to piggyback on that, Dave. This does increase our capacity. It'll make things better. But a lot of people are asking if this is going to allow us to take all campers off all sidewalks and all public property and all of that. And the answer is no, it won't. It will get us closer to being to that point, but we're not solving homelessness with this. We're improving the situation. And this is part of the journey that we are taking to get there. It won't be a complete fix.
Supervisor Corsi, if I may, too.
Sure.
I think there's an interesting part to this, which is there's compassion and there's the need for us to provide solutions to people who are willing to come in and get off the streets. And on the other side, there's accountability, is that by opening more sites, it also allows us to enforce encampments on the streets. If individuals do not accept services and we have sites available for overnight, for sleeping, then it allows us to be able to clear encampments. And that's, some people like this, some people don't, but we have to be very direct. That's the tough love side of it. So we provide the compassionate option. We provide different non-congregate shelters. We're at a point where even court orders have said that we can't just provide congregate shelters, the ones like Sam Jones Halls. that some people find trauma in, where it's the old shelter where you can imagine cots in a big warehouse kind of area. And instead, we're moving to this non-congregate area where individuals have individual space. So for us, we're under a lot of scrutiny to be able to provide those options, but it allows us to do what we need to on the other side, which is to enforce anti-camping ordinances that are going to come before the board in April as well.
Thank you for mentioning that, Supervisor Gore. One of our webinar guests, Tim, asks, related to, has a formal agreement been reached with Santa Rosa concerning this emergency shelter site? And specifically he asked whether there's been an agreement with Santa Rosa Police Department for patrolling the adjacent neighborhoods.
I don't think that there's a formal agreement surrounding these two sites, which are on county property. We've been in contact with the city, Supervisor Gore and myself, with city council people, and our staff with city staff. And I know that the sheriff is in contact with the police chief, but in the end, the Santa Rosa Police Department is responsible for the city of Santa Rosa streets around the campus, and that will continue.
Okay, Jennifer, also from the neighborhood, says the neighborhood around Russell Avenue is already inundated with homeless individuals. We have a shelter already. Why not look at other neighborhoods?
I think I noted at the beginning that the reason for where we're looking right now is that these are our county sites under our control, that we're able to set this up almost immediately once a decision is made. We are, the Russell site was brought up at Tuesday meeting. I think that staff is doing some due diligence on that to see whether it might work or might not. The original two sites that we focused on were the Permit Sonoma lot and the Vets building.
Tim also asks whether the county has advised Steel Lane School of this proposal. I can say that yes, Steel Lane has been notified. In fact, they were invited to join this this session today. I'm not sure they're with us, but they have been notified. And I want to group a number of other questions. There are a lot of rumors about how many of the homeless in Sonoma County are being shipped here from San Francisco or other areas. There's word on the street that people are given vouchers or bus tickets and sent to Sonoma County. Could we address the validity of these, some of these rumors?
I might, Michael, do you want to kind of respond to that from what our point in time count shows?
Yeah, I think I actually addressed that in the chat, but I can address that really quick too. Yeah, there's no evidence of that. If it has happened, it's probably a very rare thing. But over the past 10 to 12 years in our homeless count, the number of people who became homeless or in Sonoma County has always been between 80% and 87%. So with the exception of 2022, which was around 67, 68%. So we're not sure if that was an outlier or not. So long story short, it's the lowest it's ever been is 68%. The highest is 88%. Draw a figure in the middle, 80% or so became homeless here. So the folks who are experiencing homelessness here, by and large, from Sonoma County, and they're your neighbors.
This is a similar thing that has been heard for years or a rumor up in areas like Arcata, Eureka, where there's high homeless populations. I've seen it up and down the coast, Santa Cruz. I'll state from my perspective and the individuals we've worked with, I've yet to find a single verified case of that, but a lot of fear that that's actually what's happening. The other side of it is that I think, as Michael said, is that it's difficult because it takes it away. It takes the issue away from the real problem in our community, which is that we do not have affordable housing. we do not have options for these individuals. We had a spike in homelessness following the Tubbs fire because there were so many people who were living precariously. And when we had the loss of more than 5,000 homes in Sonoma County, all of those individuals who are either some covered with insurance, some others, or of means, also pushed other people out of those places for 3 years in a rebuild process. We had a report come before our board that validated that. So drive around Sonoma County, realize that code enforcement, it's very, everything that is done means that we have to have perfect housing or no housing. And there's not a lot of deed restricted areas. We even have housing vouchers from Housing and Urban Development that cap rent and allow individuals who live at the poverty line or below to be able to get basically rents reduced, but we don't have enough private property owners to accept those vouchers. So the difficulty is that the reality is this is our problem. And some people could say, I don't agree with your numbers, but this is our community. So that's what the numbers show.
Thank you, Supervisor Gore, for underscoring that. Michael, if I could go back to you while you're with us, here's another question you might be able to help us with. How will peer advocates be incorporated? Can volunteers be welcome to bring supplies, food, and comfort to this emergency shelter? Do you want to address that one?
Sure. And obviously Dave may want to jump in with more, but volunteers would be welcomed, I think, as long as it's orderly and set up with the site operator. But for sure, volunteers would be welcome to bring food, supplies, etc. And we would certainly love to have peer advocates be engaged as this develops. I think peer advocacy and peer support are really critical in folks' recovery and moving along to securing housing.
And also related to services at this shelter space, Dave, maybe you and Michael want to work on this. Are residents are they going to receive any job training or help with obtaining employment? Or Tina?
Yes, absolutely. That is one of the services that the team provides. Yes.
Okay.
Excellent. And some of the individuals will already be employed who will be at the site. So yes.
Yeah, good. Those questions come from Mindy on our Facebook audience. Let's see.
As you're looking, Paul, when I expand on what Tina said, because James and Nasim here will verify exactly that it is surprising. It is always surprising to us how many of our Sonoma County homeless have jobs, and it's just not enough. And as Supervisor Gore mentioned, the cost of housing is so high that we have employed homeless people, and that speaks to we need to do better.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Including university students, college students. I mean, it's not the typical person that you would, maybe think, but people you would never guess who are standing next to you or that you're checking grocery items with at the cash register or who are waiting on you at the restaurants.
Yes, and just to highlight that point, we have people working at Walmart, at different stores, different restaurants, and they're just getting on their feet at our locations, which are temporary. And once they have gained enough, they're moving on. And so I think our director, Tina, really emphasized the human aspect of what we do, the work that we do. And we can't ever forget that, at some point in time, all human beings will find themselves looking for help. So we're providing that, and it's a tough sledge, but we have to do it. And I'm grateful for all the folks that have put in the time and efforts, and to make places possible. And I would like to thank the Board of Supervisors for helping with this issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that conversation. Carla, one of our webinar guests, says, I work with unsheltered people in the community, and there's a lot of avoidance of shelters because of the authoritarian, often condescending treatment people receive from service providers. Who will be running these camps, and is a more respectful and humanizing co-management approach in the works?
The
So-
provider
ahead.
is yet to be determined. And thank you so much for that that question. And we will ensure that whoever is running the site will be running it with compassion, because that, of course, is a priority for us.
Great. We have a few more questions related to operations of the site itself. Will residents be signing a contract for general standards of living arrangements that they must adhere to? That's the first question. Is there a contract they're asked to sign?
Dave, you want to answer that?
Actually, Tina, you may know this better than I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, they will. There will be rules, house rules, if you will. So yes, they will be required to sign a contract, if you will, if you want to call it a contract. But yes, they do so at all of our sites.
You're hearing
And-
there from the voice of experience between Tina and James and Dr. Nassim that, again, we operate 3 sites and have those same kinds of rules today.
And then on that note, is there a no alcohol and drug use policy in that area?
Yes, there is.
Okay. These questions might might go toward our supervisors or our staff, but Mr. Moore asks, what are the determining factors in choosing one or both of one or two of proposed county sites over another?
Well, let me start with that answer by saying that the board on Tuesday allocated the money for these shelters and approved looking at 3 sites: the Vets building, the Permit Sonoma parking lot, and the site on Russell Avenue that's been mentioned a couple of times. At that point, we also empowered staff to do their job and figure out what will work best. So from here, we're trusting staff to come up with the best plan, and I'll let staff tell us what their criteria may be at this point.
And the overriding criteria is really it's about logistics. What site makes the most sense for the operations, where you can establish the tents properly, you have access with a shower trailer, you have access to easy refuse removal, working on the porta-johns. If you need to have some emergency access, all those kinds of things that really weigh heavily on the logistic side. We're not unaware of neighborhoods though around that we look at that too, but primarily we're looking at effective logistics, making a safe and well-run emergency housing location.
And let me follow up for Mr. Moore and ask the next question, and that is, what kind of timeline are we looking at here?
We're trying to do this quickly meaning days, not weeks, certainly days, not months. Our target is the first part of March, so it's not far away at all. We're not going to be able to pull it off next week, but we'll certainly be working on the week following that.
Thank you.
Okay, a couple of questions about when there be, what this will trigger the clearing of Joe Rodota Trail. Rita asks in particular, when are you going to take the fences down from the trail? They don't work and they are ugly.
I don't think we have anybody here from regional parks. But my understanding is, and if somebody knows this better than me, feel free to jump in. But
I was going to say, once we've determined our location, and we meet weekly, and really we're in contact every other day with parks. So once we've determined the location, that will trigger our clearing and enforcement. So we can't give you a timeline right now until we have determined where we're going to stand up our site location. So once we've done that, and we certainly can send out notifications or noticing, and then Matt, of course, can speak more to this as we have been in discussions around this. So Matt, you wanted to add some things? Go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, it'll technically, we'll start noticing for people to relocate from the trail once we're able to concretely offer the people placement at one or both of these sites. And then the timeline has to be consistent with being able to relocate all those individuals that are willing to accept the services by whatever date we're requiring them to leave the trail. So typically it'll probably be a week from the point in time that we're ready to start moving people into these sites.
Matt, since we have you, Matt Lilligren from our county counsel's office, we have a question here, a general question from Wendell, who asks, is it lawful to make limitations of camping on public property? And I guess the follow would be, what are those limitations?
Sure. And that's what we're in the process of actually doing right now with the board. And we had a revision to our public camping ordinance, which applies to unincorporated areas of the county and the county-owned properties. We brought that to the board in October. We're kind of refining that and intend to bring it back April with certain time and location restrictions to areas where people are legally permitted to camp. But as Supervisor Gore stated earlier, kind of the general rule is, you have to provide people that don't have the means to afford somewhere to sleep indoors to have a place to sleep, whether it's by providing them shelter or providing them a public space where they can sleep at night.
And Matt, I know there's another question that I saw immediately afterwards, and I want to honor it. It talked about the fact that a lot of these neighborhoods are already heavily impacted by homelessness. So I've had some pictures sent to me that show encampments along the streets in the neighborhoods pretty close to the county already. And I'm interested, really. I'd like to ask, I said it at a very high level, but maybe Tina Rivera with the Heart Team or somebody is to talk about camp enforcement within the numbers that we have to achieve. Dave, maybe you could as well. But as I talked about before, it's, it's hard because you just have to speak plain about this. Is that when you go in outreach and you look at an encampment, and you say, we're going to clear an encampment. At this point, you have to have sites available. You can't just scatter an encampment legally, right? The second thing is some people say, well, just do it. You're like, no, that's not the way it works. We have homeless activists. We also have a responsibility under the law. We have individuals who sit there with these encampments, right? And they'll hold up basically placard. And I'm not chagrining these individuals. They're trying to force a solution through the county and others so that local jurisdictions live up to the law of the Martin v. Boise or the Sonoma County and I won't Venoni, other side of things. And so at that, you provide options. And then let's say in any encampment in between 20 and 30-40% of individuals might accept services. But you're able to actually move those encampments at that time, even if those individuals are what are called service resistant, if they decide they don't want to live within the rules of one of these areas. But if we create that capacity in the system to be able to have enough rooms available to be able to tell individuals you still have the space available to you, it's a difficult point to make, but we still have an obligation in my mind and an opportunity to have not only our law enforcement, but law enforcement in the cities to continue to move people out of areas that are public. And so I don't know if anybody wants to add any on to that, because I think it's a big thing. It's very difficult because you could see in one way that you just be chasing some individuals who don't want to accept services around the county. But that's what's available to us right now is, sorry, you can't stay here. Well, then you're going to move. You can't stay there either, right? Do you want to accept services? In a way, it kind of it's trying to wear people down with compassion also, right? And with opportunity. So I don't know if anybody wants to say if they agree with that or not, but I think that's one of the questions people have when we provide options, but they still see homelessness on the streets in their neighborhoods outside of these sites.
The only thing I was going to add is that we do constantly see through doing this, consistent with what you're saying, people over time, we will funnel people into services that have been service resistant. And I can think of one individual in particular that for 2 years of doing this, he refused to he just refused shelter every time. And now the guy's in a county shelter and has been for a year or 6 months, I guess now. So, I think it does slowly kind of provides part of a solution.
So one of the questions that I saw has to do with CEQA. It doesn't mention CEQA, but it asks about why no negative declaration about the impacts here. Can someone address the environmental impact rules?
Yeah, so it's actually included in the resolution, and this was was attachment B to the board materials, but it was part of the amendment that was made at the board meeting. And so there's the actual resolution that was adopted incorporates the CEQA findings that these type of shelter crises, emergency housing sites are exempt from CEQA requirements under the government code and public resources code. I don't have those specifically offhand, but when I think the revised resolutions will be published in the next couple of days, and those have the CEQA exemptions in them.
Thanks, Matt.
Okay, Suzanne says the issue of dealing, I believe referring to drug dealing on the shelter site itself is not the issue. The issue is dealing and using in the immediate neighborhood. She asks, what is, and I guess who has the responsibility for the security of the nearby neighborhood? Dave?
There it goes. I apologize.
Okay.
The issue of illegal activity is the same as if a person had come out of this encampment or were on the street for another reason doing illegal activity. You call the cops. And I'm not trying to be dismissive in this. Our operators and our security will work hard to maintain the security of this facility. But if someone is conducting illegal behavior in your neighborhood, always call the police.
Great. One of our anonymous requesters asks, how will the site be maintained for cleanliness? I noticed the site in Roner Park has a lot of trash that spills out into the street and park across the way.
So we'll have a normal trash contract. We'll have a trash collection. It will be similar to what you would expect, that folks are supposed to keep the place tidy within reason. I visited the Roner Park encampment too. I did not see trash spilling out. I thought it was fairly well run, though people do have their belongings around them inside, but I didn't see a trash problem.
Okay. Someone asks, how will this affect parking at the county government center, given the construction that's going on Ventura? There's no street parking available when I get home from work already around the Ventura Avenue area.
I know this will be a meet and confer issue with folks who are county employees, and it may be best to leave it to that meet and confer process. It's always our hope that we'll be able to both operate this and have the required and enough amount of parking for the employees.
And Dave, for the public who may not be familiar with government speak and labor speak, meet and confer is basically negotiating with representatives of our employees to come to some agreement about these issues, correct?
That's right.
We have several people want to get at the issue of the concern here is about mental health, and that a number of our homeless residents are really dealing with mental health issues, and the concern being that they will end up right back where they were. Could we talk about a little bit about what the county is doing toward addressing that issue?
Well, we have mental health treatment services and supports, and of course, if individuals need more intensive treatment, we do have treatment services or treatment facilities that they can be transferred to. We have more intensive treatment for individuals who are in crisis. So with respect to, I'm not certain what the question is, or what individuals are asking for, but that is what our case managers or our multidisciplinary teams, many on our teams are licensed clinical professionals. This is what they do. That is why we have a varied, disciplined team of professionals who are alcohol and other drug counselors, who are behavioral health clinicians. They will have access to our psychiatrists, things of that nature. We have our psychiatric healing center. So if we need to escalate individuals to an overnight stay at our CSU, which is our crisis stabilization unit, that can be done. But we also partner with others here in the county who provide other types of treatment, residential or outpatient, with respect to mental health. So this is the benefit of working with a multidisciplinary team who provide this type of intensive case management. Dr. Nasim, I don't know if you'd like to add something additional with respect to the mental health treatment that we provide for our clients and those who will be coming in and connected to these services.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Tina. So we work very closely with behavioral health clinicians and individuals who are licensed and certified to do assessments, and then to provide referrals for treatments as needed. On a weekly basis, we do intensive case conferencing, making sure that if anyone had slipped through the cracks of being missed, if an individual is in treatment, but they're no longer coming, we figure out who within the county of our county partners may be in contact with them and where they may have found them. On a weekly basis, several times, every single day, actually, throughout the week, we have people from our HEART team, professionals, same people who are caseworkers, case managers, as well as licensed certified behavioral health clinicians who are on the JRT, looking for individuals who they may have slipped through the cracks or aren't in treatment, or reaching out and saying, would you like to come back? And what can we do to get you to come back? And what services do you need? This is a group, I'd like to say, when I say group, an entire department, entire division, we're so compassionate, so professional, and treat each individual that they come across with the utmost dignity, that I was floored when I came and I was became a part of, the privilege to become a part of this team, with the utmost respect that they treat each person. And they, when we talk about the individual, we say this gentleman or this woman or this gentle lady. And so the utmost effort, it goes to making sure that we provide the right treatment for those who are in need and who want that help as well. And then we do our best to make sure that if for whatever reason they become disconnected, we try to grab them and connect with them with partners throughout the entire county where they're maybe receiving services with as well.
Thank you.
If
Yeah, go ahead, please.
If I may, first of all, thank you, Dr. Nassina. It's beautiful. I agree. One thing, Chair Corsi, that I'm interested in is and for the rest of the team is that there's a lot of comments on here and questions about not just the site. I mean, there's definitely individuals who are concerned about the site. There's employees, there's others in site management, but then there's others who are saying, hey, actually what I'm really interested in is that what's the offsite impacts? And that's something we deal with a lot of developments and a lot of other things. So, Councilmember Rogers talked about a good neighbor project with a city. I was interested in how, I know that was something that was discussed high level, but Mr. Kipp, Mr. Rivera, Chair Corsi, I don't know if there's anything that we could talk about, because I personally would want to, the reason I'm always invested in the solution is because I also believe it's not only the right thing to do, but it also allows us to deal with unmanaged homelessness. Not that we're going to create a site and it's going to create more unmanaged homelessness on the perimeter of that site and others. And so I think that's something that I personally would really like to look at. And I don't know if you have any thoughts overall on how it's been managed effectively up until now and anything we might need to look at as a board.
So I do think there are good models we can and should and will follow. One is to have the good neighbor policies, but also to stay in communication. Some of our colleagues in other jurisdictions set up weekly community calls where right as soon as a project starts to say, this is your opportunity to talk to the staff person most responsible, the service provider most responsible, and the security team to make sure that we are addressing things as they come up and that we're not unaware of something that the neighborhood may be aware of that we need to be. And I think those have been effective. Those have been effective in making in helping give reassurance that people are serious about security. And they're also effective in making sure that the project itself works well.
And I'm interested in doing something like that too, and would be willing to participate for this or any other site that we come up with. I want to just recall that my first week on the board, I think I had my first meeting with the neighbors around the Project Homes Key site at the Hotel Azura down at the corner of College and Mendocino Avenues in downtown Santa Rosa. The neighborhood around there was already impacted by homelessness, close to a lot of the service providers in the Railroad Square area, close to the downtown Santa Rosa. They were very much concerned that this was going to add to what they felt was a big burden on their neighborhood. We agreed to meet with them on a monthly basis. Tina was part of these calls. We met on a monthly basis for about 3 months. And I think before the first call, no one had moved in yet. The second call, a few people were moving in. And what we heard was a lot of fears, a lot of concerns about what might happen. By about the third month, we were talking about, how can we help? Are we allowed to bake cookies and bring them? And quickly it went from every month to every 2 months. And I can't remember the last time we had a call, Tina, and I don't know about you, but I don't get complaints about that facility. But yes, absolutely, I'm willing to take part in those kind of communications with the neighborhood on a regular basis.
And then to add to that, Supervisor Corsi, we also, the provider did security on the site that you're referencing. And so as part of that good neighbor policy, provided some perimeter security as well. We had interior security, but also they would do evening patrols right outside of the facility. So they would take their, I don't know if they were in a golf cart or what it was, but would just ride outside of the site to just do a swipe or a sweep, if you will, whatever it's called, right outside of the facility to ensure that it was clean, that, you know, was there any loitering, things of that nature as well. And so that also assisted in providing some extra, not only security for the neighborhood, but also just, you know, a good neighbor effort to ensure that we were being those good neighbors to the neighborhood. So.
I think going through and figuring out who are the individuals, whether it's everybody or there's block captains as we've created in certain areas. I mean, I'd love to be a part of that. It's my obligation, it's my responsibility to be a part of that and to be accessible to those individuals. If I'm living in an area where I have homelessness in the streets around me and there's a homeless solution, you know, 70 yards away, and the individuals in my neighborhood are not receiving services there or being held to account, and it's just the Joe Rodota Trail or it's just others, I'm going to have some issues. And we do know that all these sites are interchanging and moving, but I mean, my goal is to continue. Is to continue to provide those and to prove that we can do this right. And I think the only way is not in the what, but the how. So I hope that's going to be. I don't know how we want to structure that, but maybe at the end of these calls, there's the 3 or 4 series of town hall meetings. We have an opportunity for you know, follow up with that, where people can sign up to be a part of those, and I'll be a part of those.
Okay, we're almost getting to the bottom of the hour and the end of our 90 minutes, but we have just, I'll try to squeeze in 1 or 2 more questions. One is really about timeline, and I'll pose this one. Denise asks, will you open the county campus site first? What is the timeline here, I guess, is part of the question.
I think that's yet to be determined. Remember, we need to work on the trail encampment basically all at one time. So we need to have enough capacity in one emergency shelter or 2 emergency shelters to be able to manage the clearance of the trail and offer everyone who wants one housing. Certainly our priority here today, our discussion here today, is around the county campus site, but I can't say one will leapfrog the other yet. We just don't know that. We'll be happy to talk about that further when we know more.
And then Sally, one of our email followers, asks, what happened to all those hotels and vouchers program for the homeless? Are those not available anymore? She asks. I think she's asking whether that could be used instead of this shelter.
So I think great question first, and thank you for it. As we talked about a little earlier, we're doing this cycle now that isn't working, and that cycle involves hotel stays. And we don't have vouchers. We use just regular old money and buy hotel rooms. And what happens is the type of care that we can give in a relatively uncontrolled environment is not as successful for the people that live there than it is in something that's more managed, where we can be close to and have wraparound services, as Tina mentioned, on a 24/7 basis. So picking up people from an encampment and putting them in a hotel doesn't work. They fall out with the same problems they had before. And in fact, they have even more trauma because of that experience.
And I think she may also be referring to Project Room Key, which was launched during COVID, which has now phased out. So that was a project that was early on during COVID, which was a number of hotels that were provided early on during the COVID response. And so that particular project has phased out.
I
Okay.
think that kind of highlights that, we have to work with the resources that are available to us at the time they're available. And, even when we have resources, a third interpretation of that question might be about housing vouchers. And, we have, I don't know, probably more than 100 people in this county who have vouchers that would help them pay their rent, who are unable to find people to rent to them. Because some landlords, whether under the table or over the table, won't rent to people with vouchers because they think that they're somehow not as good a tenant as others. But actually, they may be better tenants because they have a voucher that pays their rent. The rent's guaranteed by the government, and if anybody's interested in renting to somebody who's got a voucher, we'd love to hear from you. You can call Paul. James, did you have your hand up there? Okay. So it is 4:30. I want to say, I know there's still a lot of questions in the chat. Maybe not all of the panelists are able to stay on, but I'm willing to stay on for another 10 or 15 minutes to answer a few more questions, Paul.
Great. Sure. We have a lot of questions. We've answered a lot of them, but there's still more on specifics. Some we're working through as we answer. One question, it's an operations question, Dave, for you and your team. What about transportation for people at these shelter sites? Will there be a shuttle like the Los Gilicos shelter? And will there be access to hot and cold water? That was another question.
So yes, there will be a van, a client van that we can take people to medical appointments or to job training or to, if they need it, to employment, to help them on the path to new housing stabilization. There'll be wash stations, porta johns, regular showers. All of that is part of what happens in a emergency shelter location like this.
Okay. A number of questions related to how we're going to be interacting with the sheriff's office and police about operations there. Any thoughts on that?
I believe that the sheriff is responsible for law enforcement on the county campus, and the police are.
Yeah, it's actually the SRPD under the MOU with the sheriff's office.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Matt.
So anywhere outside of the board chambers or the sheriff's office, the jail and the sheriff's office parking lot is under the MOU, the responsibility of SRPD. So they would be the primary law enforcement agency responsible for calls that are outside of the encampment. We would be dealing with the security within, with a private security company and in the surrounding kind of perimeter.
Okay. Thank you.
A couple of our listeners, viewers are concerned about this as a residual impact of our larger housing crisis. I think we'd all agree on that, and they're asking how much is being invested in development of low income housing that could directly house some of these individuals who might be cared for at the shelter. Thoughts on that?
I can take a start at that.
Sure.
has been a significant amount of money coming to our nonprofit housing developers, which is super, from both federal sources and state sources. You see buildings going up all over, but as Supervisor Gore mentioned, we're still coming out of a deficit. But again, the Caritas Homes is up and underway, 64 units. 30 of those are for the most chronically homeless. Phase 2 there is another 64 units. Project Home Key 2, the site opening in Petaluma, that's 60 units of permanent supportive housing. The county has a site in the Russian River area for 22 units of permanent supportive housing. Healdsburg has a site. So this is more kind of the high touch, high service housing, but also our Community Development Commission partners, again, are funneling through a significant amount of money to good developers like Mid-Penn for the Roseland project, Burbank Housing for multiple projects, to make sure that that low and very low and extremely low income level housing is addressed. Will it be enough? I sure hope so, but we need more. We just need more of everything in order to make sure we really get ahead of people's housing needs in Sonoma County.
I'll just add that there are a number of private nonprofit builders that are actively working throughout the county to build legally deed restricted affordable housing. You see apartments going up quite a bit in southern Santa Rosa. You'll see more in central Santa Rosa very soon. There's some going on over by the SMART station. All of those have affordable components to them. And eventually, the idea is that the people who next month may be living in these tents, somewhere down the road, not too far, may be living in those affordable apartments.
And one of our last questions here is Thomas, and a couple of people have asked about whether we're tracking the experiences and what other communities are doing that could serve as models for us. Thomas in particular asks, Santa Clara County utilized the Lived Experience Advisory Board of Silicon Valley to help providers develop rules and regulations. They are also consulted on what services are needed and how to deal with difficult issues. Why has this not been done in our community?
So it's a great question, Thomas. It has been done. It's an ongoing process, however. I met with our we also have a Lived Experience Advisory Board that's associated with the continuum of care that our team helps staff. I met with them for upwards of 2 hours a couple of Fridays ago, talking about encampments just like the JRT and what's the best way to move people with dignity and respect who have been on the trail where they don't feel like they get dignity and respect, and moving them to permanent housing. And this is part of that path, and it is informed by that discussion and continued discussions with them.
Okay, Chair Corsi, I think we've addressed the bulk of a lot of the questions here. I just want to remind everybody that we appreciate all the questions and all the feedback, and we will be collecting that and sharing that with our leaders and our other board members who are not with us today. And we will also be posting many of these questions and the answers on our website as soon as we pull those together. And we will be notifying the public about where those questions and answers will be posted. So that is our goal. And we just want to thank everybody for all of these, your engagement and participation.
Okay, thank you, Paul. And thanks to all our panelists and everybody who's been part of this today. I appreciate you coming on short notice on a Friday afternoon. I want to acknowledge that even though we answer the questions, the answers may not be satisfactory to everyone. I think that's something that we all are going to have to understand. The only way that we can prove to the community that this is a step in the right direction for homelessness not a step backwards for the community, is to show you that it's not. And that is by putting up a shelter site that works, that's well managed and well organized, and helps people get on their way to a better life. Again, thanks for all who helped us put this together, including our Spanish interpreters, Julie and Lorna, and our American Sign Language interpreters, Jennifer and Chris. Want to remind all of you that we will do this again on Monday at 5 o'clock. If you're registered, you only need to register once. This will be recorded and posted. And on Monday, the focus will be on the Santa Rosa Veterans Memorial Building parking lot. I'm sure we'll get a lot of the same questions, but it'll be focused on a different site. So thanks, everyone. Hope you all have a good weekend. And yeah, Supervisor Gordon.
Yeah, just one final thing. I saw that there was one question in there, and I just want to acknowledge, somebody said, why aren't all the supervisors on this call? I don't know if we answered that, but I just wanted to state that, you know, the way that that our work goes is we are not allowed as elected officials on a single body, whether that's a special district, a school board, a city council, a board of supervisors, to have a quorum, which would be 3 of us on any meeting, one meeting on an issue that is not agendized as a formal board of supervisor meeting that includes a whole lot of bureaucracy, a whole lot of posting, a whole lot of other things. And so don't be surprised to see something like this, where you have 2 supervisors, supervisor my side from the district that represents this area, which was changed in redistricting last year for the first time. So even though I'm proud to represent you, even though this is a difficult time, my district goes all the way up to Cloverdale, comes all the way down past the Flamingo. And then Supervisor Corsi, obviously your district covers Fairgrounds area, and I would assume you'll have another colleague there for that in a different conversation potentially. But we try to make sure we do this right so that we can also be nimble for you and for ourselves, and also then have our regular board meetings on Tuesdays. Thank you.
Thanks for explaining that, James. I didn't want to leave that question unanswered. Our other colleagues would be here if they could, but it's not the right kind of meeting for all of us. Again, have a good weekend, everybody. See some of you on Monday.